Okay, so let's talk about the panelists that we have tonight. Larry Huss, Oregon Catalyst. You can read Larry on Oregon Catalyst, I think at least once a week. Larry doesn't always live in Oregon. He moves down to Arizona when he gets a little cold. Okay? So he can still play golf and have his wife beat him. Used to be the vice president of U.S. West Telecommunications, and I think Dennis Tooley. Where's that? Dennis, did you have any relationship with Larry that you want to talk about tonight?
I worship him.
You, and you know what? I do as well. For a number of years, I mentioned this to Larry tonight. For a number of years, I did not attend the County Republican meeting because they were boring as heck. But the one that I remember before I became chairman of this and tried to make a difference was Larry Huss. And we are so honored to have his brain here tonight, and hopefully the rest of them. Then we have Roger Lee, okay? And Roger's with EDCO, Economic Development for Central Oregon. He's the executive director, and you read about Roger all the time in the paper. Not in the one section, no, but this is a mine. This is a great mine. Jason Williams, the first website I look at every morning, okay, is Oregon Watchdog, his website. I hope you're going to be able to publish it in the morning, right?
Yes, we will.
Good.
Yes.
Good. This is a treasure trove of local and state information. Does such a great job, and he also cross-references the Oregon Catalyst information too. So, Jason was the co-founder and director of Taxpayers Association of Oregon. Jason looks out for us. And it didn't matter whether he's a Republican or a Democrat, he's looking out for us. We appreciate him. So I think we're fortunate to have, in baseball lingo, we call these the heavy hitters, right? Okay, well, I'm the heavier hitter, but. So we're going to begin with Larry, but everybody in the panel is going to have a little different perspective on the ballot measures, and we welcome that. And please, back and forth is fine too. I think what we want to do is pretty much hold the questions until each of the three has had a chance to make their remarks, and then we'll open it wide up, okay? Not a lot of structure, just go for it. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Well, I've gone through the ballot titles that have been approved to be circulated, and quite frankly, most of them involve small segments of Oregon and are probably not of general interest. I think the big one that I identify is Initiative 28, which is the
I'm sorry, Larry, we can't hear you.
oh, okay.
Thank you.
Initiative 28, which is the tax increase on businesses with sales over $25 million. Now, I want to talk a little about the process, and we'll talk a little more about the economic impact as we go down the line here. But this is a process that basically defines the state of Oregon's politics. This is an initiative sponsored by the Oregon Public Employee Unions. This is a group of people who have $130 million each election cycle that is collected by the state and local governments and forwarded to them quarterly. The public employees unions do not have to do the same things as traditional unions. They don't have to bargain with anybody because the people on the other side of the table are the people whose finances got them elected. So they're dealing with their own people. They don't have to do any organizing because in Oregon they have an agency shop, which means if you want to work for the government, you join the Public Employees Union. They have $130 million, and this was the figures. The last time I was able to get access to the figures was in 2013. Since that, they grow every year, and so my guess is we're getting close to $150 million each election cycle. And so what they have to do with their money is spend it on politics, because politics is what gives them power, money, membership. It is their reason for being. And so when they need a little more money, which they always do, there's never enough money to fund the state, they are in the vanguard of creating new tax revenues. And that's what they've done with Initiative 28. They filed 4 initiatives that basically did the same thing. And then they took them out and test drove them with polling and such to see which ones registered best for voting, and they settled on this one. The other element of this that is so brazen and so difficult to deal with is that once again, just like the last big tax increase in Oregon, they have focused on a methodology in which they get the revenue and they don't have to pay. The vast majority of voters in Oregon will not be impacted directly by this tax increase. They won't pay it. Corporations will pay it. It'll show up somewhere along the line in the cost of goods sold, but it's virtually invisible to the voters. And so the best way, as we've known for a long time, and it represents the beginning of the destruction of democracy, is when the majority realizes that they can vote themselves a benefit at the expense of the minority. And that's where we are in Oregon today. We run tax increases out. They only impact the upper income earners if they are individual income tax, or the upper income earners if they are corporation taxes. The people who are voting on them, all those 30-year-olds who have retired in Portland, they don't pay this directly. They don't see it. And so, you know, this is an initiative that's going to pass. Trust me, it's going to pass. The other part of this is that when and I've worked these initiatives just like Jason has previously, when we needed money to transact these things, to hire people to gather signatures, to pay for advertising and such like that, we had to scour the earth to find contributions. You were on the phone day in, day out, trying to raise enough money to make the thing go. These people make 4 phone calls. 4. They go to the OEA, the AFT, the AFL-CIO, and the SEIU. Maybe the nurses union. They're getting involved in this too. That's it. We need another $100,000, make your 4 phone calls. And quite frankly, it's the same thing for the governor's office. When Kate Brown runs for governor, she doesn't have to make tens of thousands of solicitations and calls. She's doing that because it's nice to be able to say you got contributions from 10,000 Oregonians. But the fact of the matter is that the overwhelming majority of her contributions will come from the public employee unions. And not just the public employee unions in Oregon. She will get contributions from the teachers union in New York City, and Chicago, and Los Angeles. And in turn, the teachers union here will ship some of their money down to the others. So it doesn't look like just one outfit is funding it. There is a nationwide effort. Kate Brown is so wonderful that unions all over America are chomping at the bit to fund her campaign for a greater Oregon. And it's just bull. But that is the state of where we are now in the Oregon political circles. The Democrats, and not just the Democrats, it is the Portland Democrats, the liberal Portland Democrats, have a lock on Oregon government. They own the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state, the Supreme Court, 4 out of the 5 congressmen, and it's been that way for 3 decades, and at this rate it will go on for 3 decades, assuming that Oregon lasts that much longer. You know, I don't know where to suggest that this starts to come unraveled, because there is a phenomenon going on in Oregon that I simply cannot understand. And that is, despite these high taxes, despite this oppressive government, despite 3 decades of incompetence in government, despite one scandal after another, most of them sex scandals, Neil Goldschmidt, Congressman Wu, Mayor Sam Adams, besides those type of things, the voters continue to send those people back. And we're having economic growth. There's a theory out there, I've been hearing this from some of the business people here, is that because of the internet, because you can work from wherever you want, because your business may be in Dallas, Texas, but your favorite climate is Portland, Oregon, that a lot of economic wealth has poured into the state, not to the betterment of the state really. It has an impact in growing jobs, most of them at the lower end, with the exception of the high-tech companies. But it creates sort of this artificial economic growth because the production of things is not being done in Oregon. It is people working and scientists in Oregon, but producing their product elsewhere. The net outcome of it is elsewhere. Will Oregon collapse of its own volition because of these kind of people? It's doubtful with the advent of the internet and the phenomena we're seeing. If the only thing I can see that will adversely impact Oregon in the next 10 years is if Intel and Nike say, to hell with it, we're leaving. Beyond that, this phenomena seems to be continuing to occur, and it gives the politicians, and particularly the public employees unions, who are the primary beneficiaries of this bill, access to easy money. And the part that just drives me nuts about it is the very last part of it, where they talk about what the things are for. It says the revenues from tax increases goes to public education, early childhood through grade 12, health care, services for senior citizens. That is crap. All of those are funded out of the general fund. If you give them $25 million more in tax revenues dedicated to that, that's just $25 million that the general fund doesn't have to fund, and they can go off on another boondoggle, which they're famous for. Maybe like Portland is, we can fund night school for hookers. That's enough for me.
Was that day school?
I probably use day school. They're busy at night.
Well, thanks, Larry. For your perspective, there's obviously a bunch of initiatives out there, but certainly IP28 is getting the most kind of traction and notice, which is great. Here, I think it's got more notice than most initiatives. But there are actually 49 initiatives that are still pending or still active. They call active. There's some living dead amongst those, and you talked about the public employee unions. Oh, that's right. It's interesting out of those. I think it's on. Okay. Out of those 49 initiatives that are out there today,
Maryland's going to check on it.
seems like I heard it when you were talking.
So Roger, yell at them from now on.
All right.
So we get mics.
Okay. So of the 49 initiatives that are active, it's interesting to see that 10 of those were put forward by the public employee unions. Now, they're absolutely right. They're versions, a lot of them are versions on each other, and it seems like they've been pretty open about, like, we go out and poll, we see what's going to go forward, and then that's what we put our effort behind. But, we can talk about some of the other initiatives as well, but maybe just to follow up on what Larry's comments on IP28. I really see this as potentially unwinding 20 years of economic development efforts in the state. And I know I've been doing this almost 25 years in Oregon, and it's nothing like we've ever seen. We actually brought in an economist out of Washington, D.C. with the Tax Foundation, independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan, and they look at tax structure not only in the U.S. but abroad as well. And they're amused almost with what's going on potentially here in Oregon with IP28. It's really unprecedented in the U.S. to have a 2.5% gross receipts tax on, not on profits, but on revenues. Is pretty. It's just there's no one to compare it to. I think in the U.S. If you look at Washington to the north, it has a gross receipts tax, and it's I think it maxes out at 0.38%. But they also have no corporate income tax, and so that's kind of a balance for that. So it's really new ground, I think, new territory for potential tax policy in the state. And I can tell you that we're dealing with companies in our own region. We have about 200 companies we're working with that are looking at investing here, from inside, outside, and even startups, that this will impact in a great way. It's not going to impact all of them, but the legislature actually has legislative council that they engage to look at impacts of this potentially of this legislation. This information came out the end of last month, and it predicted that Oregon will lose 37,000 jobs. So 37,000 jobs, what is that? I mean, how do you compare that with what's out there? So if you look back at the last 10 years, rural Oregon actually lost jobs over the decade. And that includes some of this recovery we've had. It includes some of the good times before, obviously the recession, and then some of the rebound. If you look at just Oregon's MSAs, they created about 12,000 new jobs net together over the last decade. So obviously that's more than just a few decades there. And if you look at Portland, it's actually net positive about 100,000 jobs. But that's all come in the last 3 years. And so this is a huge impact to the state. Now, that same report said that it would create another 17,000 new jobs in the public sector. But I think what they don't realize is that the public sector relies upon taxes that are paid by the private sector. And so, 22,000 lost jobs in the private sector is massive loss, and we see that from the larger companies here that have the ability to move across state lines. I think the best example in the U.S. recently was, we talked about the East Coast, how Connecticut lost the headquarters of GE to Massachusetts, and they cited tax policy, and they cited inflexibility of public leaders there to show any kind of, I think, understanding of how that tax policy was impacting that corporation. And that's been in that state for a long time, I think since its inception. So definitely is a huge concern for us. I think just in general, and I'll wrap up my comments, and we can talk about other initiatives as well, but when we talk to businesses, we talk to a lot of companies that are interested in the state, and we meet one-on-one every year with 300 to 400 businesses at their place of business to talk to them about a whole variety of things, from workforce to capital to business environment and taxes and so forth. And the things that we're hearing from both local companies and ones from outside the area that concerns them is our overburden in this state of personal income taxes. I think a lot of Oregonians don't realize that it funds 85% of the general fund comes from personal income taxes. So when people in this state are not working, the general fund really feels it in a big way, much bigger way than other states. And the second thing they express concern about is this initiative process that creates all kinds of unfunded mandates. It creates really bad policy like IP28 that voters are simply supposed to check yes or no on. And many voters, unfortunately, just do not get educated about what the impacts of these measures have upon the state, its budget, or its business climate. So that's something that, we have one of the most easy initiative processes in the state. And personally, I believe that it is, the bar is way too low, I think, to enter that process. and we're seeing it be really abused by a group that is well funded and well organized to basically game the system. Now, I'll say one last thing about our chances on IP28 is that there is an active campaign on this that we've joined with others. It's the campaign is defeat the tax on Oregon sales, and it's probably a $20 million fight, but they've already raised several million into that, and there are larger corporations as well as small companies joining that, and I think we can absolutely defeat this thing. The GMO was polling at a lot better rate for the state. This is 2 elections ago, and it failed by 800 votes in a state of 3.8 million people. Not all voters, obviously, but and that was actually polling at about 75% approval rate going into the campaign. This has gone from 65 down into the high 50s as far as some of the polling goes. So I think it's definitely defeatable, but you have to get out there and pound the pavement and make people aware of what's going on.
I want to interject at this point. The underlying cause for this initiative is the inaction on PERS. And as the Ben Bulletin pointed out a couple days ago, Senator Tim Canopus, he's the only one that's been yelling, we've got to reform PERS. But that's the underlying current.
Absolutely.
And that's a difficult process. I mean, we started the fight on PERS at least a dozen years ago, and even when we won it, we lost it because the Supreme Court, all of whom are beneficiaries of PERS, pass on the constitutionality of the effort. So they've had 2 reforms of PERS that finally made it through the legislature, and both of them got up to the court, and both of them have been struck down. Now there is a process underway that makes it extraordinarily important for the next president of the United States to appoint conservative justices. And that is a case that came out of California, which challenges compulsory union membership under the First Amendment, the right to association and the right to speech, or the flip side of it is the right to not associate and to not be bound by somebody else's speech. And that case was pending before the United States Supreme Court, and it was a slam dunk that the unions were going to lose. And then Justice Alito died. Or not Alito, but
Scalia.
yeah, Scalia died. He was the 5th vote. So right now, pending is who's going to be the 5th vote when that case makes its way back to the Supreme Court, and that can be done in short order. They can move the case back into the court in relatively short order, but it's extraordinarily important. The only way you're going to get PERS reform in a state like Oregon is to break the back of the unions in their compulsory membership. That's it. They've got all the money, they've got all the politicians.
Jason, there are other initiatives, aren't there?
I come bearing good news, folks. I come bearing good news. We are part of a team that has 2 petitions, measures. We are close to coming across the finish line and qualifying for the November ballot. When was the last time you had 2 measures to vote for in the November election? I think it's been since 2006. This is going to be an exciting year, and I think that's going to cause a lot of people to come out of the woodwork, because they don't always have a chance to vote positive for something. So I'm going to talk about the 2 measures we're involved with. One's called the No Fake Emergency Petition, the other one's called the Voter Privacy Petition. And before I get into that, just a little bit about this. These petitions couldn't come at a better time. Are you feeling some of the earthquake and mood changes here in America? The public is saying, they're sending a lot of clear messages that the politicians, they've kind of had it with a lot of the liberal politicians. A lot of the same old, people really want change, and we're getting a lot of what's been even happening here in Oregon with the liberal leadership is that they have really been shutting out the voters. We saw this happen with the gun debate last year with a gun bill that came up, that this exemplifies what's wrong, where they knew when they wanted to pass a gun control bill that people were going to show up and tell them things they didn't want to hear. So they cut off the hearings. So where most of the people who showed up couldn't testify. We're talking people came for 3-4 hours. But basically, those liberal politicians said, sorry, your voice doesn't count. We don't want to hear you. Shut up, is basically what they said. To add insult to injury, they put an emergency clause on that bill, which basically said as soon as the governor signs it, it becomes law. Usually there's a waiting period where people, if they don't like what the governor signed, the people can do a petition and they can rally enough signatures and force that to the ballot. It's called the referendum drive. Well, you can't do that if there's an emergency clause on it. And all they need to do is to put the word in a bill saying this is an emergency. So guess what we have? That gun bill had an emergency. And when we look through the record, a lot of crazy bills had emergencies. You remember that little hidden 19-cent gas tax that Governor Kitzhaber and his girlfriend kind of worked on the whole part of the scandal? That she was being paid, not paid, she's an employee, not employee. It was all kind of wrapped up into this one scandalous bill. Well, they put an emergency clause on that too. They also rushed that bill through the process, if I remember it correctly. The Cover Oregon, you remember that $250 million healthcare website that just kind of flopped? That had an emergency clause. We had to rush out a horrible idea to people so it could fail. We had the CRC bridge, that $250 million that was spent. It was a little bit over $100 million that was spent, but they never built it. Once again, they were put an emergency clause on it, so they had to rush it out there. Well, this year, the governor signed 70% of the bills. All were declared emergencies. So most of the bills that we cannot have a say on. And here's some other ones that are just strikingly extreme emergencies. The bill to create a Trailblazer license plate was declared an emergency. The bill to establish the Commercial Board of Interior Design, because we know that there's nothing but ugly kitchens that people are suffering from. This year we saw the building of the artificial beaver dams bill had an emergency. Look, if there's a disaster among the Beavers, it's their football team. It's not their. I'm a Beaver fan. I'm a Beaver. I just say.
He's not wrong.
You know, take a look at some of these other ones here. You know, the bill to put Mark Hatfield's statue in the U.S. Capitol was an emergency. To establish the Salmonberry Trail Fund. Some of these get real weird. Like there was a bill there to say florists have to put their address on all their written communications. What is this stuff? There was, I guess it was Senate Bill 177. This had another emergency clause. Establish task force on healthy people. Look, first of all, we don't need to study healthy people. We need to study the unhealthy people. You know what I mean? There is no emergency. I mean, it's but luckily, they got caught. They got caught doing this. And you know what? People were complaining about this last year. The media was complaining about it. Lawmakers were talking about it. And yet they knew, and we submitted our petition last year. But you know what? They didn't do anything. They just kept stuffing the bills this year with emergency clauses. It's almost like they're daring us. Well, they're going to lose this if it comes to this. So we have a petition, and we have some out there in the lobby, in the tables. Basically says if it's an emergency, and you're going to block a people's ability to repeal your bill, just get a 2/3 majority. Just get a supermajority. That's what other states do for when they declare emergencies. Why don't we do it as well? And there's some other exceptions as well. But we need your help with that petition because, hey, we're coming across close to the finish line. We submitted enough, but we don't have enough safe signatures. And now we're down to the last few weeks. July 8th is our deadline. And we really do need to bring in about 3,000 or 4,000 more volunteer signatures. So if you could grab a petition and a text and you could just mail it on the back, just get your friends to do it, it matters. And when you do volunteer signatures, they're more valid than the paid ones. They have such a high validity rate. They actually help us. They're more valuable than what's gathered with the paid signature gatherers. So it helps so much. So that's one way to help. The other petition that we have is the Voter Privacy Act, which is basically the idea that your private information is on the voter roll and anyone could go in and get that information. I can go to the Secretary of State and say, hey, give me 1 million Oregonians' give me their name, their address, their birthday, their phone, their email, if it was included on there. And it's like, that is something that people who use ID thefts, if they can know your name, address, and birthday, they can begin to work out a formula about who you really are and begin to set something up. And Oregon actually was rated the 4th highest ID theft in the nation. So we have a petition that says, make your birth date private, unless you give your permission. Same thing with phone number and email. I have no problem giving an elections office my phone number. If they call me, if they think there's voter fraud, I want them to call me. But it doesn't mean I want them to give it out 1 million phone numbers to strangers or ID theft people. And it also makes private when you have voted. Because we're seeing examples of moms at home with their kids, and people come to the door during election saying, give me your ballot. I know you haven't voted yet. And they say, I'm sorry, I still need more time. I haven't voted. So what happens? 3 days later, give me your ballot. We're seeing people being harassed at the door. And so we want to be able to kind of say, let's stop the voter harassment. So let's protect your birth date. That's just something that doesn't need to be out there. Your phone number, your email, and when you have voted. So that's the voter privacy story. And some people say, well, no one has really abused it. Well, do you remember that DMV when they used to give out all of your license plate and home address? They thought that was fine until one guy did something really dumb. He took the whole DMV list, and it's tragic what he did. And he said, well, since your driver's license says how much you weigh, he figured he grabbed everyone who was single, because they matched it up against their voter file, and who weighed a lot, and then do it by age, and then he mailed out a letter to all those people saying, from what he called the Lonely Hearts Dating Club, and said, do you have a hard time finding people because you are overweight? And he did that with public information. Now, luckily, when that happened, after that happened, people got so mad that the lawmakers passed a bill and put that information private. So now your driver's license information is private. We don't want to have another explosion. So anyways, with that petition, we're doing very good with that petition. It's statutory, but the one that we really need help with is the voter privacy. Please take time. There's been some wonderful people here. Patty, who has been gathering signatures, and others here. You've come up to me here tonight that you've been supportive, so I appreciate that, and thank you very much. And before I go, I do want to give thank you, because one of the things we've been doing for 16 years is we give out a Thomas Jefferson Award to the great lawmakers that do stuff. And I know sometimes we hear about the complaints, but the winner of our last year's Thomas Jefferson Award is in this audience. We gave it to Gene Wisnett. This guy, he's our little Einstein down there with the budget, and he's really been working hard. He never gets credit for it, but we were able to award him, and so I want to end off on a good note, saying we have 2 exciting measures for the ballot. If you can help us cross the finish line, and also just kind of give thanks. There's a lot of great stuff being done here, and Senator Tim Knopp, he's also been a guy who I've been working with for 15 years, a guy who I deeply admire. You don't know how lucky you are. I live in the Portland area. You don't know how lucky you are to have good representation. So hug your lawmaker tonight, okay?
Now we're going to open it up for questions, and by questions, I don't mean don't take the floor and make a statement to tell us how you feel, Mike. We're after questions, and identify which of the panelists you want to have answered. Margaret, I know you have a question.
Oh, I can think of one, probably. As I understand it, this Measure 28 is a tax on sales and not on profits. And I think that should be thoroughly explored in the papers to let people know that it's a sales tax. That word is dynamite.
It's not what the name of the
That's not a
committee is.
question.
No.
That's a question.
Is it right? Is it right? That would be right. Is that correct?
It is correct. It is a tax on certain corporations. So it's only a tax on C Corps, not on S, not on sole proprietorships, not on LLCs. and it's only on that gross receipts tax kicks in after $25 million in sales.
Right.
So it's obviously the ads are going to campaign. It's the cigar smoking guy in the limousine that is going to pay their fair share, and that's the you're going to see that come out, I think, in the ads.
Isn't that a tax on every step of production?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It could be compounding. You may have something like a 10 or 12% tax by the end of the day if you have a supply chain that includes separate corporations.
I think
Yeah.
sales tax should be in big letters.
The campaign is actually defeat the tax on Oregon sales.
Okay.
I have
Phil.
a question. On the IP 28, so when they do that, can you come up locally with all of the companies that we're going to be impacted by, whether it's, I don't know how many companies that we buy from every day have more than 25 million, but I mean, do you know now, and are you working on that concept that it's PP&A, it's your electric bill?
Yep.
I mean, what other would be examples of that locally that you could
Well,
think of?
if anybody drinks beer,
Deschutes
there's
Brewery.
a few breweries.
So it's gonna be a tax on your Deschutes Brewery.
Yeah, grocery stores. I mean, everybody shops at all those grocery stores are C corps. Financial institutions are all organized as C corps. Most of them are over 25 million. So they'll just tack on additional fees to cover their additional costs, which means we'll all be paying it. Yeah, the legislative report actually indicated that each Oregonian would pay an average of $600 more a year in added costs for goods and services.
Are the utilities exempted from that as benefit companies?
There's no exemptions whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
Your Steve Passel who
Healthcare organizations is another one that people don't think about, but your hospitals, or certainly your private clinics, like Ben Memorial Clinic is an example, they're all going to be well over that $25 million limit. Car dealerships, they're super concerned about this. They're high volume, low margin many times, and Lithia has already said out of Medford that they would move their corporate headquarters out of the state if this passes.
But I'll tell you one thing that I saw somewhere in the polling, they're having a problem with the polling on this. It's in the low 40%, which means if we spread the word, we can kill this thing. This could be a huge embarrassment. I mean, it's going to hurt us all. But if this thing fails, I think it could have painful ramifications for the unions for doing such a destructive measure.
Well, the crazy.
Will the IP 28 affect Facebook and Brineville?
It's a good question. It has
I
to
don't
do
know
with
what kind of corporation they are.
it has to do with Oregon sales, and those facilities there's actually no transactions happening.
Well, sure, they sell advertising. Facebook sells advertising, that's how they get their money.
Yeah, it has to do with where the nexus is of that. And I'm not a tax attorney, but
Okay.
it's almost like
They get a sweet deal from the state saying they don't have to pay any taxes for
Yeah.
the first 7 years that they're in business.
I mean, it might be comparable to there's a large distribution center for Walmart down in the Hermiston area.
Okay.
They're not really selling anything; they're supplying stores. That's a little bit similar with the data centers, is that they're supplying service to their mothership and kind of the overall system. But yeah, there's a couple other taxes that, initiatives that we didn't get to talk about that I think we find concerning. One of those really, or actually two of these, are around carve-outs of the lottery. Was anybody here when the lottery was created in Oregon back in the 80s? Anybody remember what its original purpose was? Economic development. Yeah, today the economic development that funds business attraction and helping existing companies is well less than 10%. And yet the two initiatives we have IP 3 called Keeping Our Promise, Oregon Veterans Lottery Bill. I mean, who doesn't support veterans? I mean, it's like motherhood and apple pie. I mean, who's not going to support their veterans? Well, that's a 5% carve out of the lottery. It could actually compare to what you actually spend on economic development today. There's
That
another
doesn't
one.
mean that the veterans are gonna get any more money.
Yes.
It just frees the general fund from having to fund whatever benefits the state is paying.
Which measure is this?
That's IP3. There's actually one referred by the legislature, HJR 202, that actually is at 1.5% of the lottery. And then you got another one that's it's one of those things again, like who wouldn't think this is a good idea? There's an organization called Outdoor School for All, and it takes 5th and 6th graders, and it gives them a week in outdoor school, et cetera, you know, away from all our devices. And it's the organization itself is great, but they want a $44 million carve out of the lottery every biennium, which if you look at economic development since the late 80s when this was created, budget today is about 60 million. So you carve out some of these things, and pretty soon there's nothing left. So, you know, if these two measures pass, I think you can just pretty much write off economic development in the state.
Now, Roger, on that one, I know that they're approaching people as it's the extra money.
Extra money.
Right. And that was my question is, what are they considering extra money from the lottery that's not going anywhere?
Yeah, so the 70% of the lottery that goes to K through 12
right.
education, correct me if I'm wrong, Gene or Tim, that is extra money.
Okay.
So the things that are carved out right now, there's a 15% carve out for parks and for watersheds. I think there are a couple of other carve outs out there, but those are like the statutory carves out. Everything else, I guess, is quote unquote extra money.
Extra. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? What's the answer, guys? What's the answer? Republicans.
Need some balance.
We do need a balance. We can't be a one-party state any longer. And you know, and the great thing this year, we've almost always had great local representation. We've been very fortunate. But we've got some great candidates for state offices. Bud Pierce is a great candidate. Dennis Richardson is a stupendous candidate, right? Right. And I'm hearing wonderful things about the Attorney General candidate, the Treasurer candidate. We have an opportunity this year because we have good candidates. We haven't always had good candidates, I'm sorry. We've got some really good candidates. We need to support them. And we need to get behind these ballot measures because we're the foot soldiers when you think about it. I don't care about the polls. We're the foot soldiers. We're the ones making the call. Remember when Patty and the DCRP got behind the defeat the Ben gas tax? What happened? They made call after call, and we got that defeated in a big way. We can do the same thing on these ballot measures, and we can help get some statewide candidates elected that'll do a good job for the people. We need to do it. We really need to do it.
And I'd say to my fellow Republicans, don't be afraid to have fun in what you do. As we try to outreach people, we tried to outreach to youth. We did a pizza party, and we had a pizza party in the Capitol. We packed it out. We had these students come. They'd never been in the Capitol before, and it was a lot of fun. And we did things. And so sometimes we have to kind of put ourselves into the minds of the people we're trying to reach. And I know we conservatives, we're very much kind of like, we believe what we believe, but we oftentimes forget to tell people about, well, how can I frame it in a way that it matters to them, how they could feel like, how it would impact them. And I deal with this because as I do direct mail, if I can tell people about it's going to raise $1 billion tax. If I say it's going to cost you $300 a year, woohoo! What a difference that makes. But also having fun. I tell you, the Taxpayer Association. I mean, we've been doing this for 16 years. We've done a lot of cartoons on Kit Sauber, and now we're doing them on Governor Brown. And we got the cartoon, one of them in our newsletter out there. It's fun. It's fun, and people love cartoons. So we've done. It's okay to have fun. I just want to let you know about that, and it's okay to maybe do things a little bit different because people believe what we believe. The pollsters ask Oregonians, are you liberal, conservative, or moderate? Liberals only get like 24%. Nationally, they've never been able to break 20%, so we're not that much more liberal. The moderates take the most, but the conservatives, it's like 30-some%. People believe what we believe, and I know we get see about these taxes, but you know what? When taxes have been on the statewide ballot, Oregonians have said no to every single statewide tax increase since the Great Depression, except for 3. 67 was 2 of them, and that was a bad time, and then there was a cigarette tax. So that's it. That's 70 years of saying no to taxes on the statewide level. We could do this. People agree with us, so it's about connecting with them. And I tell you, if you have fun doing it, you'll get more people, you get more attention and more progress.
I noticed that young people don't get their news from the paper. They get it from their cell phone.
Margaret.
Are we set up to flood those cell phones with information? They know what's going on, but they get it in a different way than we do. Old folks. We like to read our papers. They don't.
Very true.
Yeah, that's
Can
why.
you repeat the question? I don't think everybody.
Yeah, the question was, the younger generation is not reading newspapers. And so and there's a lot of candidates now that are doing a lot more online ads, so it appears in their Facebook. In fact, there are candidates who, they can take your Facebook, and Facebook will sell you can match it to voters. So you can target just voters, which I thought would be a great thing to do for some of the politicians we don't like, is just to target their Facebook page with our ad, so there is reaching, but there needs to be a lot more about reaching them where they are, and they're on their phone
That's right.
doing ads there. So
Because I can start explaining something I read in the paper, they already know all about it, and they don't take papers. So they have to go through the devices that they use.
Yeah.
And we saw that when we did the then gas tax. John Philo did a wonderful job on Facebook advertising that was reaching that viewer.
The interesting
And
about
we intend to do it again, provided we get enough financing. We're going to be doing that stuff, and Phil's going to be doing this campaign. Okay? If we can each give Phil $10,000, he can do it in his campaign.
That's all.
one of the interesting things about the younger generation is Facebook is kind of really pretty old.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat, it's a whole bunch of other things, Twitter, and a few things I can't even, recall. So it's changing a lot.
Yeah. Okay, there's a second part of this meeting. Do we have another question?
I did have another
Please,
question. It doesn't
please.
have to do with the measure, but it has to do with that, because it's something that we've just tossed around, I know at our house recently, since I have 3 young voters. Is there any Central Oregon Young Republicans group?
There's the answer right here.
currently, to my knowledge, if there is, it's not strong enough that I've heard about it.
Okay.
I'd like to think of myself as a younger voter. I'm only 23, but looking to try and get that kind of community going back here. I know that I think in my generation and the younger generation, it's more of a feeling of apathy due to a feeling of disenfranchisement. And so that there's all these national stories that get attention, and you can see nationally the success of grassroots for like Senator Sanders. I don't like Senator Sanders' viewpoints on really about anything, but the man had an amazing campaign in terms
Right.
of the
Totally.
grassroots success, with college kids.
So the reason I asked that is because I know my 3 kids just recently said, why don't we start getting out there and throwing barbecues? Why aren't we doing something? And so that I thought, well, I'm going to ask tonight because they are like on fire to go for it. And I said, well, and you guys can reach a lot of people.
Well, that's
so
a, yeah,
I thought I'd
that's a
find out.
major
So we
event.
should talk.
Absolutely, that was a major event that in the Oregon State University Republican Party. I was talking about Mr. Henderson for our campaign, trying to set up a dunk tank at the fair, and you gave a little contribution, and then there was somebody sitting there with like a Hillary mask or President Obama mask, and they just had the dunk tank. You can nail them like that. Just it grabs their attention. Then they come over there, and then you get the chance to actually talk to them. And once you get that, my generation is quick to lose in terms of they just are ready to look on for the next thing. But if you get their attention,
they'll give it to you. It's just a matter of grabbing it, is the question.
But Turning Point,
No doubt.
Turning Point USA just met where they had 400 young conservative women that were in college meet in Dallas, Texas because of Charlie Kirk. And Zoe from Oregon State, who was the vice president who spoke to our group, talked about it. I mean, it's so incredible. I heard Charlie Kirk about 4 years ago. I wrote his name down, and you've got to follow what he is doing. So he actually is engaging young people. I mean, women normally don't get really involved in our party till after we have our first child and realize that it does take two. Helps, you know, for raising children. But these women were all down in Texas. They had a great week, and I follow them on Twitter. So you want to find out what they're doing. I love
Did
Twitter.
you get that,
really.
that unit? That's
Yeah, I was working, trying to get a job with them before I moved back over here, and one of my close friends works for them. He's kind of the head of the Turning Point USA in Oregon. They're actually trying to get a super PAC kind of connected with Turning Point going in, which is makes them more focused at legislative levels. But I think with the right connections, especially with the growth of the college campuses, Turning Point really likes to focus on college campuses.
Right.
And so with the growth of the one locally, along with, I think this area, I mean, without a doubt, and I can say it's personal experience, colleges are the liberal haven that they're stereotyped to be, but certain areas are far better than others. Definitely Corvallis is one, and I think in this area, you might be surprised at who will come out of the woodwork if they're given the opportunity to see someone else like-minded doing it.
Yeah, and a word of encouragement, when I was in college, I went in as a liberal, and I kind of came out as a half conservative. Trust me, there's a lot of Jason Williamsons that are in college right now. They just need someone to sit there and just lay it out to them. So,
Just echo
Jason,
change.
you would love this group. You know, their motto is taxes suck.
Yeah, big government.
I know. We bought a table. We bought a table. Steve Forbes coming into town this Friday, and we have a table just for young Republicans. So yeah, we're for Turning Point. So, and if you happen to be in the area of Portland, you can come.
I might be able to make it over if he doesn't need me or anything.
Yeah.
We might all go.
Please, please.
So let's go to the flip side of that, which I totally agree with all of that, and you may all throw me out of here, but I have not been involved in politics for the first 52 years of my life. Because of what Jason's bringing up, it made me too mad. So I would rather just go this direction. I'm very fortunate to be 52 years old, retired now, and I am jumping into the politician world. And now I'm trying to figure out, how do I jump in? Where am I best used? Where can I make the biggest impact on this election? And so I guess my question is to everybody and to the panel, as a 52-year-old man for the first time jumping in, because I'm as pissed as anybody else about what goes on in the political world, where can I be most effective along with the younger generation that's jumping in also?
That's a good question.
We should talk. It's that simple. We should talk. Because one of the challenges we have is getting people who are interested enough to volunteer and educate. That's what we're after. It's all education. And let's face it, the Republican Party, especially nationally, has not done a real good communication job. Our conservative principles, I think, would have a lot of appeal if they were framed the right way. Okay? And it's not just Greg Gutfield that can frame it the right way. I mean, we got to be able to do that. If that's it, I want to ask Larry to tackle another subject, and I think we'll all benefit from it.
Okay, you all have been sitting for a bit, so I want you to all stand up. Okay, I have a series of questions here, and if you answer them correctly, you get to sit down. All right. Those of you who think we should not have approved the nuclear agreement with Iran, please sit down. You don't have to sit down if you don't want. Well, I'll go through the rest of the questions, but I figured that would be the first one. All right. Those of you who oppose the unilateral grant of immunity to a substantial number of illegal immigrants, please sit down. Those of you who think we should repeal and replace Obamacare, please sit down. Those of you who think those of you who think we need meaningful tax reform resulting in a reduction of taxes on small business and middle-income earners, please sit down. And finally, those of you who think that members of the IRS, the Justice Department, and the State Department who have withheld information, testified falsely before Congress, and stonewalled investigations should be criminally prosecuted, please sit down. You are the Republican Party in this nation. But the people who serve in Congress as the nominal representatives of the Republican Party are the complete opposite. They would be standing still. They have done nothing, not one thing. On the Iran nuclear deal, they were so weak-kneed, they let Obama get away with the idea that this wasn't going to be a treaty, it was going to be an agreement. They should have forced this to be dealt with as a treaty requiring a 2/3 vote. But not only did they let him get away with it, they set it up in a way that they were never, ever going to win. The vote was not on whether the treaty should be approved, requiring a majority, but whether on the treaty should be rejected, requiring a majority vote. And in the United States Senate, because of the way they used the filibuster rule, they knew it would never, ever come to a vote. And it did not. All those good Republicans in the House were able to vote against it. All those weak-kneed Republicans in the United States Senate sat there and watched it go by. Those who opposed the grant of immunity, Obama's attempted grant of immunity to about 6 million illegal aliens. What has the Republican Party done about that? Nothing. Nothing. They are relying on the Supreme Court to throw out Obama's executive order. And the Supreme Court probably will, although with a 4-4 tie now, that has become less and less likely. Repeal and replace Obamacare. Well, finally, they got a vote to repeal Obamacare that went through both houses. Not replace it. Still don't have a plan to replace it. And they sent it on to the president, who they knew was going to veto it. Meaningful tax reform? Nothing. Not a single vote, and yet by the polling, I mean, this crosses the aisle, it's about a 2/3 majority of Congress wants meaningful tax reform. And where is it today? Nowhere. Everybody's got their own plan. It reminds me of the Oregon Senate. Sorry. Reminds me of the Oregon Senate the year that I did a brief stint from the majority leader there right after I retired, just because he was an old law school classmate of mine. And the Republicans had a majority, but they really didn't. They had caucuses. They had 3 or 4 guys who agreed on things. And they could never agree on all things. And so they couldn't exercise their majority. And that's what goes on here is we got tax reform. We want 2/3 of the members agree on tax reform, but nobody can get enough people on their plan, and they won't look at anybody else's plan, and so nothing has been done. And then the final one is you've got a slate as long as your arm of people in the Obama administration, particularly in the IRS, the Justice Department, the State Department, and Home Security, that have lied, withheld information, and nothing's been done. They've even held some of them in contempt of Congress, but nothing's been done. You can remove people. You could have removed Eric Holder by impeaching him. They didn't do that. They could have required the Attorney General to prosecute Lois Lerner, but they didn't. So all this stuff goes on, and the more often it goes on, the more often it will go on.
Right.
Because we have demonstrated you can get away with lying, cheating, withholding information, and turning your back on the whole process. And now we have a candidate for the Democrat Party who is the #1 liar, cheater, withholder of evidence that has ever run for public office. And yet she has won the Democrat nomination. And if the Republicans don't get their act together, she's going to win the presidency. But the problem doesn't lie just with the Democrats. You have people in Congress who don't represent what you think. How is it that you keep sending those people back to Congress year after year after year, and they don't listen to what you say? Oh, we know better for you. We're a lot smarter than you. We're closer to it. We've examined these things. You should listen to us. We'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. Go back, pay your taxes, shut up. And that's where we are today. This has got to stop. We have lost any semblance of a democracy when a select few people can ignore the wishes of the voters for decades and continue to be sent back. These people don't even really work that hard. There was an article that came out just recently that, and this was the Democrats, and quite frankly, they have it easier to raise funds than we do because they got the unions who do most of it for them. But when they brought the freshman class in for the last Congress, the Democrats, they sent out a talking points piece, and it said that they are going to be required to work 4 to 5 hours a day on fundraising. And so when do they get around to doing our business? And that's the situation we're in. You know, I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I didn't support him in the primaries. I had other candidates. Carly Fiorina, she's my champion. But he has hit the nail on the head. He talks about the disconnect between the people and their government. And by God, that is where we are. I don't care whether you like Donald Trump or not. I don't care if he's got a big mouth and a tin ear. No matter what he has said or what he has done, he is so far superior to Hillary Clinton and that collection of crooks she brings along with her every day of the week that you have to vote for him. Hold your nose and vote for him. I don't care. He's got to be better than that. But more importantly, you have to do something about the people you send to Congress. You have to hold them accountable. You have to tell them that this crap that they use with the filibuster rule in the United States Senate has got to go away. Not the filibuster, how they use it. It used to be if you were going to do a filibuster, you had to stand on the floor of the Senate and talk. You had to command the floor without hesitation, without interruption, for the length of the filibuster. Well, we don't do that anymore. Now you have a closure rule. You don't even have to threaten a filibuster. You simply have to show that you're going to get 60 votes to invoke closure. Crap. That's crap. I don't want to do away with the filibuster rule, but I want people who believe in it to stand up and use it. Hold our attention. Move our emotions. Convince us as to whether you're right or wrong by your logic and by the facts and by your willingness to expend energy to follow the filibuster. This crap that's going on now has got to stop. It is designed to make the lives of the United States senators easy. Get up and work. That's what we're paying you for. I'll leave you with that.
Well, gentlemen, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for your great ideas. Inspiring. Inspiring. Now it's our job, isn't it?
Yes.
It is our job. We will do our job. Thanks again.